At dinner, my parents sneered at me across the table and asked, "How does it feel being useless?" I said one sentence, and they both froze. Stay with me till the end, because what happened that night changed everything I ever believed about family. And if this story hits something deep inside you, just leave a little love, because some stories deserve to be heard. The night started like any other Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Ohio. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, and soft jazz played from the old radio. My brother Landon sat across from me, scrolling through his phone like he always did. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect life. My parents, Elaine and Patrick, looked at him with pride, their voices warm whenever they spoke his name. And then there was me, Harper, 27, recently laid off, sitting there like an unwanted guest in my own family. It started small. My mom asked, "So Harper still looking for a job?" I nodded, trying to stay polite. "You know," she continued, slicing her chicken, "if you were a bit more like Landon, you wouldn't be struggling so much." My father laughed softly, shaking his head. Yeah, at least he didn't waste his degree chasing silly dreams. Their words stung, but I stayed quiet, pushing food around my plate. Then my mom went further. "What happened with Miles again?" she asked, pretending to sound innocent. "Oh right, he left you. Must have been hard losing a man and a job in the same month." Landon smirked. My chest tightened, but I still said nothing. I'd learned that arguing only gave them more to feed on. But then came the line that cut through the air like glass. My father leaned back, looked at me with that same disappointed glare I'd seen since childhood, and said, "How does it feel being useless?" My mother chuckled beside him, sipping her wine. The room felt suddenly too small, too quiet. My hands trembled, but I lifted my head and met their eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said one sentence, slow, steady, cold. Whatever it was I said made both of them go completely silent. My mother's fork slipped from her hand. My father stared at me like he didn't recognize his own daughter. Even Landon stopped smiling. I stood up from the table, placed my napkin down, and said, "Thank you for dinner." Then I walked out. The sound of my own footsteps down their hallway felt louder than their years of criticism. Outside, the air was cold, but for the first time in my life, I could breathe. They didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of something. I wasn't the useless daughter anymore. I was the calm before their storm. The drive home that night felt endless. The road was dark, and the only sound was the hum of my old car's engine. My hands were tight on the wheel, my chest heavy with the same ache I'd carried for years. I kept hearing their voices in my head. My father's sharp laugh, my mother's cold tone, Landon's quiet smirk. Useless. The word echoed like a wound that refused to close. As I turned onto the narrow street toward my small apartment, I thought about all the times they had made me feel like this. It wasn't just tonight. It had always been this way. When Landon needed college tuition, they paid it without question. When I asked for help, they told me to learn responsibility. They bought him a brand new car after graduation, and when I got my first job, they sent a plain text message, "Proud of you. Don't mess it up." I was never enough, no matter how hard I tried. The memories came flooding back in waves. The day I introduced them to Miles, the man I thought I'd marry. He was charming, well-dressed, with that fake kind of smile that made everyone love him instantly. My parents adored him. My mother called him the best thing that ever happened to me. My father treated him like the son he never had, even though he already had one. I used to think it was love. Now I see it was blindness. Things changed fast after our engagement. Miles became distant, secretive. I told my parents something felt wrong, that he wasn't the same man anymore. But they brushed it off, saying I was too sensitive, too suspicious. When I finally found out the truth, that Miles was cheating on me with my own cousin, Riley, I thought my world had ended. The betrayal burned through me, not just because of what they did, but because of what came next. When I confronted Miles, he didn't even deny it. He said, "Riley understands me better." My cousin stood beside him, silent but smug. I remember running to my parents for comfort, for once hoping they'd take my side. But instead, they defended him. My mother said, "Maybe if you were a little less dramatic, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere." My father just sighed and said, "Let it go, Harper. People make mistakes." I never forgot those words. That was the night I realized I was alone. The people who were supposed to protect me had chosen someone else again. But as I sat in my car in the quiet darkness, something inside me shifted. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something colder, sharper. I promised myself that I'd stop trying to make them love me. I didn't know how yet, But one day, I would make them feel what I felt. One day, they'd understand what it's like to be betrayed by your own blood. The diner was quiet after midnight, the kind of quiet that made you think too much. Harper wiped the counter for the 10th time, her reflection staring back from the chrome surface. Tired eyes, pale skin, and a calmness that didn't match the storm inside her. She worked double shifts, sometimes through the night, saving every dollar she could. Her co-workers thought she was just trying to make rent, but the truth was deeper. Every tip she tucked away, every hour she spent on her feet, was part of a plan. The plan didn't come all at once. It started as a thought, a small whisper in the back of her mind while she stood behind that counter serving coffee to strangers. Revenge. Not loud, not wild. Quiet. Careful. The kind of revenge that looks like kindness until it's too late. One slow night, Harper overheard two men at the counter talking about their businesses, how one of them lost everything because of poor financial management. Something in that conversation clicked. She started wondering about her parents, the perfect couple with their perfect house. They acted untouchable, but what if they weren't? When she got home, she opened her old laptop and started searching. She dug into public records, company filings, property taxes, things most people never looked at. That's when she found it. Landon's business, the one everyone bragged about at family dinners, wasn't doing well at all. He had taken out loans he couldn't repay. The Quinn's name wasn't as spotless as they pretended. Then she discovered her father's pension was nearly gone. Mismanaged. Overspent. And yet, they still mocked her for being irresponsible. The irony made her laugh, softly at first, then harder until it almost hurt. Instead of exposing them right away, Harper did something unexpected. The next Sunday, she drove to their house, wearing her calmest smile. At dinner, between sips of wine and Landon's bragging, she said, "I've been learning a bit about finances lately. Maybe I could help with your taxes this year." Her mother waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Harper, that's sweet, but your brother's accountant already handles that." But Patrick, always eager to offload anything that felt like work, leaned forward. "Actually, maybe that's not a bad idea," he said. "The more help, the better." Elaine laughed lightly. "You'll get bored halfway through." Harper smiled, pretending not to notice the insult. "Maybe," she said softly, "but it might surprise you how much I can handle." And that's how it began. They handed over documents, passwords, statements, everything. She became their quiet helper, the daughter who finally seemed to care. But behind that gentle smile, she was mapping every debt, every lie, every secret they thought they'd buried. She didn't need to yell or accuse anymore. Her revenge wouldn't come with noise. It would come slowly, one signature, one file, one calculated move at a time. The papers told stories her parents never meant her to read. Harper sat at her kitchen table late at night, surrounded by stacks of old tax forms, bank statements, and loan documents. At first, she'd only wanted to understand how deep their financial trouble ran. But the more she looked, the uglier it became. There, in neat black ink, was the truth she'd always suspected. Money that was supposed to be her college fund had been used years ago to bail out Landon's failed architecture firm. Every time she'd been told, "We just couldn't afford it," her parents had been writing checks for her brother. Her hands trembled as she traced the numbers. She remembered how she'd worked 2 jobs during college just to stay afloat, how her father used to say, "Hard work builds character." All the while, they were rescuing Landon from his own bad decisions. And it didn't stop there. Harper found records showing a large family loan that had gone toward Riley and Miles, the same 2 people who had betrayed her. Her parents had helped them buy their first house together, after everything that happened. The betrayal felt fresh again, raw and personal, like reopening an old wound. But Harper didn't explode. She didn't confront them or demand an explanation. She knew that anger would only feed their narrative, that she was emotional, unstable, dramatic. No. This time, she would be the calm one, the patient one, the one they never saw coming. So she played her role perfectly. She visited every Sunday, bringing groceries, offering to help around the house, pretending to care. Elaine smiled at first, almost surprised by Harper's sudden maturity. "It's nice to have you around again," she said one evening, as Harper folded laundry at the dining table. Harper smiled back, her voice soft. "It's nice to be here, Mom." But beneath the surface, something shifted. Elaine began to notice it too. The way Harper listened more than she spoke, the way her eyes stayed calm no matter what was said. It unnerved her. One night, as Harper cleaned up after dinner, Elaine watched her from across the room and asked, "You're quiet lately. Everything okay?" Harper didn't look up. "I'm fine," she said simply, stacking plates in perfect silence. Patrick didn't notice a thing. He was just happy someone else was handling the bills. Landon barely paid attention, too busy pretending his life wasn't falling apart. Only Elaine felt it, the tension she couldn't name. Harper's politeness had turned sharp, like glass under smooth water. The more Harper pretended, the more her mother's nerves frayed. Every calm smile, every quiet nod made Elaine uneasy. She didn't know that Harper already knew everything. She didn't know that the daughter she used to call useless now held every secret in her hands. And that silence, the kind that came before the storm, was the most dangerous thing Harper had ever learned to use. Harper's nights became longer, but her movements more deliberate. Every decision now had purpose. She no longer checked her parents' files just to understand their mess. She was building something. She quietly moved her own savings into a new account they couldn't trace, applied for her own credit cards, and made sure every document she touched left a digital trail. Her parents still believed she was just their helpful daughter, the one finally trying to redeem herself. They had no idea that every form she filled, every email she sent, was a step toward their undoing. It started small. Harper noticed small inconsistencies in their tax returns, missing signatures, inflated deductions, business expenses that didn't exist. At first, she thought it might be a mistake, but then she found proof that her father had been using false statements for years to avoid paying what he owed. Her mother had signed off on them too, pretending not to know. Together, they had built their reputation on lies. Harper printed everything, scanned copies, and stored them safely in a folder labeled insurance. While she kept her calm facade, the world around her family began to collapse. Landon's business was falling apart faster than anyone realized. His investors pulled out, bills piled up, and the confident older brother who once looked down on her started calling their parents for help every week. Riley, too, was struggling. Her marriage to Miles was cracking under debt and mistrust. But no matter how bad things got, Elaine and Patrick only cared about saving them. They mortgaged part of their house, sold bonds, and even considered cashing in what was left of Patrick's retirement. All for Landon and Riley. Harper watched from a distance, pretending to be concerned. Inside, something in her had changed. For years, she'd wanted them to love her the way they loved her brother. She had tried being quiet, being kind, being successful, even being invisible. Nothing worked. Now she understood why. Their love was a transaction, a reward for obedience, not affection. She wasn't family to them. She was an investment that never paid off. One night, while reviewing yet another stack of financial papers, she caught her own reflection in the dark window. Her expression was calm, steady, unrecognizable. The girl who once cried over their insults was gone. In her place stood someone who didn't need their approval anymore, someone who had power. When her mother called that evening, asking if she could help figure out Landon's loan issue, Harper smiled into the phone. "Of course, Mom. I'll take care of it," she said softly. She hung up, turned off her lamp, and whispered to herself, "I already am." From that moment, Harper stopped being their daughter in her heart. She became their quiet accountant, their trusted helper, and their unseen judge. Everything they had used to make her feel small would soon become the evidence she used to bring them down. The night of the dinner was calm, almost too calm. Harper had cleaned her small apartment until it looked spotless. Candles flickered softly on the table, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. The same meal her mother always made for family gatherings. She wanted everything to feel familiar, comfortable, safe. The perfect trap never looked dangerous. They arrived one by one. Elaine stepped in first, looking around like she was inspecting a stranger's home. Patrick followed, carrying that smug confidence that never left him. Landon came in late, talking on his phone, pretending to be important. And Riley, ever the actress, smiled too brightly and said, "Wow, Harper, this is nice." Harper smiled back, her voice steady. "Thank you. I just wanted us all together again. There's something I need to talk about." Dinner started normally. Harper poured wine, served food, asked polite questions. Elaine was cautious, Patrick was relaxed, and Landon rolled his eyes whenever Harper spoke. But beneath the surface, tension was thick. Harper could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. Every movement she made was measured, cutting the chicken, refilling glasses, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Halfway through the meal, Harper set down her fork and said quietly, "I've been helping with your finances for a while now. I thought it was time we talked about it." Patrick chuckled. "Talk about what, sweetheart? You're doing fine. We appreciate your help." Harper looked at him for a moment, then turned her gaze to her mother. "I found out what happened to my college fund." Elaine froze mid-bite. "You used it to bail out Landon's company." Landon frowned. "That's not true." Harper opened a folder beside her and slid a copy of a bank transfer across the table. "It is," she said softly. "It's all here. Every transaction, every signature." The room went still. Elaine tried to smile. "Harper, this isn't the place." But Harper wasn't done. She reached for another file. "You also helped Riley and Miles buy their house. With the same money you told me didn't exist." Riley shifted in her seat, the fake sweetness gone from her face. Landon muttered, "What's your point?" Harper's calm never wavered. "My point," she said, "is that you all built your comfort on lies. And now those lies are about to catch up." Patrick's tone hardened. "Don't talk to us like that. You don't know what you're saying." Harper stood, her voice even and clear. "Actually, I do. I know about the tax fraud too. The fake deductions, the hidden income." She looked at them one by one. "And before you start denying it, I should tell you, I've already reported everything to the IRS." For a moment, no one breathed. Elaine's face went pale, Patrick's fork clattered against his plate, and Landon's phone slipped from his hand. Harper sat back down, her voice calm and final. "Now," she said softly, "let's finish dinner." Patrick's face turned a deep crimson as he slammed his fists on the dining table, rattling the silverware. "You ungrateful brat," he roared, veins bulging at his temple. "You think you can destroy this family with your childish tantrum?" Harper didn't flinch. She just sat there, calm, her expression unreadable. "I didn't destroy this family, Dad," she said softly. "You did, the moment you decided love had a price tag." Landon stood up so fast his chair screeched backward. "This is insane," he barked, storming toward the door. "You've gone too far, Harper. Reporting your own parents? You're sick." He snatched his coat and slammed the door, leaving the echo of his anger behind. Elaine's shoulders trembled as she pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, but there was no remorse in her eyes, only fear. "You don't understand what you've done," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what this means? The audits, the investigations, your father could go to prison." Harper finally rose from her chair, slow and deliberate. "I know exactly what it means," she replied. "It means for once, the truth isn't buried under your lies." Elaine's tone sharpened, her grief twisting into venom. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You'll come crawling back when the world turns its back on you. Don't think anyone will love a daughter who betrays her own blood." Harper's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I already did regret it," she said quietly. "For 27 years. She turned away, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The same floor she once scrubbed while her sister flaunted designer shoes. The air behind her was thick with rage, confusion, and the sharp scent of burnt pride. Outside, the night was cold, but it felt clean. For the first time in her life, Harper could breathe. The weight she'd carried, of silence, of pleasing everyone but herself, began to lift with every step away from that house. The next morning, chaos erupted. Patrick's phone buzzed nonstop. Frozen accounts, an official notice from the IRS, and calls from panicked associates. Landon's name surfaced in an ongoing investigation about insider trading. Riley and her husband Miles woke up to a nightmare. Their home, bought under false pretenses, was seized as evidence of fraud. The family empire that once seemed untouchable began to crumble piece by piece. The neighbors whispered, friends vanished, and the same people who once admired the family's success now avoided them like a plague. And Harper? She didn't look back. She moved into a small apartment across town, modest but peaceful. She brewed her coffee, watched the sunrise, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, quiet satisfaction. The family that once called her useless was now learning what life looked like without her silence. Weeks later, Harper sat by her window, staring at the city lights that blinked like scattered stars against the dark. Her small apartment was quiet. Too quiet sometimes, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. For the first few days after the dinner, she had felt powerful, unstoppable even. Watching her family's empire collapse under the weight of truth had been intoxicating. But now, as the silence settled in, the satisfaction began to fade, replaced by something softer, reflection. Her mornings were still. She brewed her coffee, watered the little plant she'd bought for company, and scrolled through her phone without really seeing anything. Every once in a while, she thought about her mother's face, the shock, the fear, the disbelief, and wondered if she had gone too far. The thought lingered like smoke she couldn't quite clear from the room. But then she'd remember the years of laughter at her expense, the cruel dinners where she was the family's favorite punchline, the way her father's voice used to cut through her like a blade when he called her useless. One afternoon, her phone buzzed. A voicemail. The name Elaine flashed on the screen. Harper's thumb hovered for a moment before pressing play. Her mother's voice slithered through the speaker, brittle and desperate. "Harper, you've made your point. Family shouldn't turn on family. We can fix this, if you stop being selfish. You owe us that much after all we've done for you." The message ended with a soft click. Harper didn't hesitate. She pressed delete. The silence that followed was heavier, but it didn't hurt. It just existed. In the evenings, she'd sit on her couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, listening to the distant laughter of strangers through her thin walls. It was strange, that sound, comforting and lonely at the same time. She wasn't angry anymore. The fury that had once kept her awake at night was gone, drained out of her with every truth she had spoken. What remained wasn't vengeance or guilt, but something quieter. Finality. She thought about family, about love, about loyalty. How those words had always been used as weapons in her house. Maybe cutting ties wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was survival. Sometimes she'd dream of her childhood, the laughter she used to force, the hope she refused to let die. But when she woke, the ache in her chest was gentler than before. Healing didn't look like she thought it would. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was sitting alone in a quiet apartment, realizing that peace doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. And that was okay. Harper looked out the window again, at the city she was finally part of, at the sky wide and open. She wasn't angry, and she wasn't afraid. She was simply done. The morning sun spilled through the blinds of Harper's new apartment, a small, modest space on the edge of a quiet town where no one knew her name. She woke up without an alarm, the rhythm of her life finally her own. The air felt different here, softer, less heavy. She brewed her coffee, opened her laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. Her new writing job wasn't glamorous, just freelancing for a small local publication, but it was hers. Every sentence she wrote felt like a quiet reclaiming of herself. The first few weeks had been strange. She'd expected freedom to feel like flight, like wind rushing through open doors. Instead, it felt like learning to breathe again after years of holding her breath. She took walks in the park, found a small cafe that served strong tea and had creaky wooden chairs, and slowly began talking to people again. Neighbors, the barista, the old man who sold newspapers at the corner. They didn't know her story, and that was a relief. She could just be Harper, not the daughter who destroyed her family. In her new life, time moved differently. There were no tense family dinners, no snide remarks disguised as jokes, no pretending to be okay. The quiet wasn't punishment anymore. It was peace. Some nights she'd cook herself dinner and play soft music, feeling a strange comfort in the solitude. She'd sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on, and think back to that dinner, the moment she finally spoke the truth out loud. The look on her parents' faces wasn't something she replayed with glee anymore. It was simply a turning point. That night had ended one life and started another. The bitterness that had once fueled her was gone now. Harper wasn't chasing revenge. She was building control over her finances, her emotions, her choices. She wrote about resilience, about people who found strength in silence, about women who stopped apologizing for being enough on their own. Her words resonated with readers who didn't know her name, but somehow understood her heart. Sometimes, when she passed a mirror, she barely recognized herself. The tension that had once lived in her shoulders had vanished. Her eyes, once sharp with anger, now held a kind of calm that came from surviving. She realized she didn't need anyone to see her success for it to matter. The victory was in existing freely, without shame or permission. One evening, Harper walked to the pier as the sun dipped below the horizon. The water shimmered gold, and a breeze brushed through her hair. She closed her eyes and smiled. Not a triumphant smile, but a quiet one, the kind that comes after long storms. She wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. She was the woman who rebuilt herself from the ruins, not out of revenge, but out of choice. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, its handwriting shaky and unfamiliar at first glance. Harper almost didn't open it, but curiosity tugged at her. The paper smelled faintly of her childhood home. That mix of lavender and furniture polish she'd tried to forget. The words inside were desperate. Her parents' finances were gone, Landon had vanished, and they were too old to start over. They begged her to come home, said they needed her, said family should stick together. Harper read it twice, expressionless. Then she folded it neatly, placed it on the table, and stared at it until the sun went down. 3 days later, she drove back to that house she once called home. The front yard was overgrown, the paint peeling, the life drained from it. For a moment, she almost felt pity. Inside, her mother Elaine sat on the couch, frail and trembling, her father Patrick beside her, his once commanding voice now just a rough whisper. The air between them was thick with unspoken history. "Harper," Elaine said, voice breaking. "You actually came." Harper stood by the doorway, her coat still on. "I read your letter." Patrick looked up, eyes hollow. "You've made your point. You've ruined us. Are you happy now?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, her heels quiet against the floor. She looked at them. Two people who once towered over her, now small, fragile, defeated. Elaine tried again. "We were wrong. We said things we didn't mean. But how could you do this to your own family?" The question hung in the air, trembling, like a ghost that had been waiting years to return. Harper exhaled slowly, meeting their eyes one by one. Her voice was calm, not angry, not cruel, just steady. "Now you know how it feels to be treated like I was." The same words she'd spoken that night at the dinner table. Back then, they hadn't understood. Now they did. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Elaine's face crumpled as tears streamed down. Patrick turned away, unable to look at her. The house felt smaller, the years of arrogance and cruelty collapsing into dust around them. Harper didn't gloat. There was no victory in her expression, no pride. Just a deep, quiet closure. She turned toward the door, pausing only once. "I didn't destroy this family," she said softly. "You did. I just stopped pretending it was still alive." Outside, the sky was pale and cold, the wind biting at her cheeks. As she walked to her car, she felt lighter, not because she'd won, but because she no longer carried their weight. When she drove away, she didn't look back at the house. She didn't need to. Some endings aren't loud. Some are just a door closing for the last time. With peace on one side and the ruins of the past on the other, do you think Harper made the right choice by walking away from her parents, or should she have given them another chance after everything that happened? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I really want to know what you think. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.